Live. Let me just put the music on, put the scene on. There we go. Well, good morning, everybody. Sorry we're slightly late. We had to log on again. Such as the vagaries of going live, hey folks. So so welcome, wherever you are in the world. People joining up already, fantastic. Yeah, we're a bit late this morning, apologies for that. We just had to re-log in, as you do. Good old technology. For those of you that have just joined for the first time, I hope you enjoy the music. This is a minor blues by my Uncle Peter, and I love this music. So enjoy as we're playing down. So we've got Steve Smith with us today, and we're going to talk about shining a light on leadership. So that's cool today. Really looking forward to that. And Steve's got a whole load of stuff to talk to us about today. So and Kathy's on. So good morning, Kathy. How you doing? Great to see you. So just counting down right now. So funny start this morning with having to log in again, but here we go, and we're just about to move scenes. There we go, super. Hello everybody, it's a Tuesday morning here in the UK, and it's just after 8:45, slightly later than we thought we were going to be this morning because we had to log on again and get live a little bit later because everything fell over. So we're live. We're streaming out on LinkedIn. We're streaming out on YouTube. We're streaming out on two Facebook groups and on Twitter. As I often say, I haven't got a clue how this lot works, but it all seems to glue together. Morning, Elaine. Good to see you as well. So, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Good morning, Paul Shipley. Great to see you as well. Welcome to this week's Leaders Live Breakfast Show. And so today I'm joined by the wonderful Steve Smith. Just a quick intro on Steve. Steve is a founder, he's a tutor, he's a board member, he's an author and a business doctor advisor as well, business doctor's advisor, and which is a kind of business support network dedicated to helping small and medium-sized businesses thrive and achieve their vision. So morning, Steve, how are you doing today? Glad you're on the show.
Good morning, Andrew. I'm well, thank you. Yeah,
good.
Very good.
You've gone slightly pixelated my end. I hope you're all right your end. But
it's a bit pixelated here as well. It was clear a minute ago, but I don't know whether it's the Manchester weather that's doing that or not.
No, don't tell me. Let me guess. It's raining, right?
Might be a surprise, but yes, it is.
Yeah, it is. Oh, actually, to be fair, we did have that conversation beforehand, but So it's raining in Manchester. I think it's raining everywhere. Actually, it's raining here. So Denise Roberts says, looking forward to this. Steve Smith, business doctor, is full of great advice and insight. So there you go. So I'll come back to you in just a tick, Steve. Let me just introduce the teaser. So it is said, folks, that in each one of us, two wolves exist and eternally fight each other. There is dark wolf and there is light wolf. But which one wins, you may ask? Well, we're going to find out today, actually, by talking to Steve Smith, but perhaps it might be something to do with the one that we feed. So Paul Winfield says good morning as well, and Elaine says love the monkey on your shoulder. Absolutely, there's a story about that monkey. So Steve was saying the same actually. So today we will explore, what is confidence, folks, and how does it link to leadership? What are the foundations of leadership, and what does that all boil down to? What is the dark side of leadership? We're exploring the dark side of leadership, that shadow side, and how does it show up, and how do we encounter it, and can it lead to people derailing? Right, so that's all that lot to come, and we're also going to explore that old chestnut, the imposter syndrome, that so many people out there suffer from. All this and a whole lot more in our interview chat with Steve Smith. So if you don't know me, I'm Andrew Jenkins. If you're new to Leaders Live, please say hello, and which you've done already. Brilliant to see so many people on live. As always, we love you to interact with us, chat with us, and especially ask us questions, comments, and we'll pick them up. Just put a cue in front of your comment, and we can pick it up as a question. Smash those likes too, folks. We love the thumbs up, so plenty of those thumbs up and all those sort of things that come on the feed. Really appreciate that. That keeps me and Steve motivated and on track. So please subscribe also to Leaders Live on my all-new website page for notifications, and also you can subscribe to YouTube as well. And please let me know how our audio is coming through as well. Phew, that's all the admin stuff done. So Kathy says the weather's shocking today. We need to join Elaine. Elaine, it's raining sunshine and vitamin D here in the Algarve. Oh, right. We're all going
Oh,
to
that's
the
cruel.
Algarve.
That's cruel.
Yes, that's cruel. There's got to be a song in there somewhere, I'm sure. Anyway, back to Steve. Back to you, mate. You're going to shine a light on leadership for us this morning. So, just before you begin, let's give you a round of applause. Not bad to get a round of applause before you've even started, eh, Stevie?
Well, that's not bad actually, but let's see what happens at the end. That's going to be the more interesting bit. And if I'm still coming through pixelated, I do apologise.
Yeah.
But it was fine a few minutes ago, so
it
not
was
quite sure what's going on.
It was fine a few minutes ago. It might be something to do with the Manchester weather. We're not quite sure. It's raining cats and dogs there. So let's get going, Steve, by starting with confidence. Okay, so what is it, Steve? What does it even mean to be confident? And what's a good way of thinking about confidence, Steve? Take us away.
Well, I think I usually, when you go into a subject like confidence, I usually just, first of all, turn to a dictionary definition and see, what does the dictionary say?
Oh, let's have a look. How about that?
There you go.
It's
a noun. And confidence is, about having faith in something or someone. And I think you look at it in two ways. You've got obviously faith and confidence in yourself, and then there's faith and confidence in other people, and being prepared to trust in other people, perhaps to get a job done. So I think confidence is really important for most people to progress. You've got to be confident, and you've got to be able to back yourself. If you're going to go on and really achieve, you've got to back yourself and have the courage of your convictions. But where you've got to watch out with confidence is sometimes people can get overconfident, complacent.
Pride comes before a fall, right?
Yeah, and sometimes a little bit worse. You can get you can get to the point of being a bit arrogant, and what I call uber confidence, which I don't think is a good thing at all, because it's the person who can never see any fault, or they always do everything the best, and I don't think that helps in leadership terms. So that's why, to me, a really important aspect is humility. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But for me, the best leaders have an element of humility. They're confident, very confident, but they have humility as well.
Okay. So, trust, faith in yourself and in others. There's also a darker side to confidence that's coming out there as well, in terms of being uber confident, overconfident, arrogant. And really, some of confidence for you is actually having an element of humility and vulnerability and things like that, which you can build trust from, I guess, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, if you look at that self-confidence, which I've mapped out as a little spectrum or a continuum, if you like, on this, you go from the left to the right, but the sweet spot here is kind of a bit more in the middle. Towards the left of this, you've got people lacking in confidence who maybe are quite timid or even paranoid, fearful. And then if you go to the other extreme, you've got that arrogance and uber confidence that I'm talking about. So the best leaders for me are in that sweet spot in the middle. We're confident, assured, accomplished.
I like that. Confident, assured, and accomplished. Lovely. Okay. And it's nice to have that on a spectrum, as Denise Roberts says. So not all confidence is good, she says. Great to break it down like this. Let's just bring Denise onto the screen here. So there's a comment from your friend Denise, and my friend, actually, a neutral friend. Good morning, Denise.
Indeed. So,
so it's not all good, Steve. It comes on a spectrum, right? A bit like a standard deviation curve, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, the good old normal distribution. You've got that bell curve in the middle, which is probably the best way to be.
Yeah.
I guess the watch out there, and we'll probably come on to talk it again in a minute, is that good old imposter syndrome.
Well, I was going to come right onto that. So that good old imposter syndrome. So many of us, Steve, so many people, they talk about this, Steve. I quite often come across it when I'm presenting. People will talk about the imposter syndrome. Tell us a bit more about that, Steve. What's your view on the imposter syndrome? What say you?
Well, for me, I think imposter syndrome in mild form is quite good, because it keeps you on your toes. It stops you being complacent. It keeps you away from that sort of arrogance and uber confidence. But of course, you can't have too much imposter syndrome, because then you end up going back towards the timid and the fearful and the paranoid side of things. So for me, it typically affects people who are confident, who are quite assured and accomplished. But it's almost in its positive form. It's like that little check step.
Check step.
you know,
Yeah, like that.
stops them going too far, stops them
Yeah.
heading a bit more towards the dark side that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So,
Yeah.
so
Stops us
yeah, I
getting to that
mean,
over proud moment where we then trip over something, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
I think of it a little bit like sort of inflation. I mean, most economists would say it's, a little bit of inflation in a marketplace is probably a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, if you go the other way and there's no inflation, then everything stagnates. And if you go too far and hyperinflation, then we all know that that's not a good situation either. So it's one of those forces that if it's just at the right level, is probably a positive and a benefit.
Right, that's really useful to hear that. This is Elaine has commented on this. Confidence links with the speaker last week. We were talking about all things behaviour, preference profiling, and this is one of Elaine's pet subjects. She's a DISC accredited person and loves personality profiling. So she's saying here, some styles of behaviour have no idea how they are perceived. All a question of balance, confidence, assured, accomplished. Love that, she says. So
Yeah, well,
any
I can
thoughts on
chip
that,
in with
Steve?
that as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
please.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Because I personally, out of all the profiles I've done over the years, and there's quite a
yeah,
lot, I've always felt that DISC was probably the one that I always remember the most. It was probably
yeah.
about 20 odd years ago when I did it in Procter and Gamble, but I think I came out as an affiliator. But I thought that captured my personality at the time,
Oh, nicely.
absolutely spot on.
Well,
So I've always been a big fan of DISC.
you probably made Elaine's day there because she's a big fan of DISC. So I'm sure she'll comment again later. So okay, so the imposter syndrome, that's a good sort of check step for us. I really like the way you've described that. And so putting confidence into a leadership context, Steve, for a moment, how does confidence apply to leadership? What are its fundamental characteristics, and how would we spot a confident leader then?
Well, I think we just talked about the self-confidence.
Yeah,
There's also, the confidence and the effect you have on other people's confidence.
yeah,
And I kind of visualize that very simply in terms of traffic lights,
yeah.
So red is the person that basically diminishes others' confidence and potentially destroys it. Amber is a neutral impact. They neither sort of inspire nor undermine other people's confidence. And then obviously you've got green, the green for go, which is the type of person that we all come across from time to time who just instill confidence in other people. They're really positive. They help people to grow. They help people to develop. And, that's the type of impact on other people's confidence that the best leaders have. And that really comes into, I suppose, at the bottom of what's behind me is the good old 3 E's that I learned many moons ago at Procter and Gamble again, which
Yeah.
is, the leadership model there was envision, enable, and energize. And I
Yeah.
think the sort of enabling and energizing is where the confidence comes in. If you've got
Ah,
someone who's the red light, then they're
right.
not going to energize others.
Yeah.
If you've got someone who's the green, who also has a really clear vision and makes the resources available to people, then they'll energize them and they'll
Gotcha.
fill them with enthusiasm and confidence. And I
Yeah.
think that nicely knits together within the 3 E's model. So you've got self-confidence, you've got the impact on other people's confidence, and that pulls together nicely in that simple 3 E's model.
Love that. And the envision, the enable, and the energize as three kind of leadership sort of superlative words there that you've got. So, and then you talked about the traffic lights: red, amber, green. How do those relate with each other? I know we're going to talk about characters in a moment, but just briefly, so you can have people on a red light, for instance, that could be really envisaging, but maybe not as enabling. Perhaps is that right, Steve? So
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see that
right,
when we talk about some different sorts of personalities. But
yeah,
the red light, absolutely, it could be someone who's got great vision,
yeah,
but what they don't actually do is energize and enable other people to reach that vision.
yeah,
So they're not as effective of a leader. You get some people who are, really, really what you would call great with people, who energize others,
yeah,
fill them with enthusiasm and motivation,
right,
but they might not be that adept at getting the resources that are required, and they might not actually have that clearer vision of where they're going. So again, they're not as an effective leader. Clearly, the most effective leaders are going to be the ones who inspire confidence, energy, and enthusiasm in other people, have a clear idea and a clear picture of where they're trying to get to, put the resources in place for people, and then make sure that they're all up for it. And that's when you get, the very best leaders.
Okay, I'm with you. So, and moving that on a little bit, then, Steve. So we were talking about earlier about the dark side of leadership, and the Darth Vader leadership. As we've said, confidence on a spectrum. We've talked about that, and some of the leadership styles are these three E's: the envisioning, enabling, and energizing. And they have kind of more of these attributes than others, perhaps. So how does that relate to the shadow side of leadership? I think you call this the dark triad. Talk us through that, Steve.
Yeah, I was introduced to this idea of the dark triad leadership
Dark triad, I love
about
that.
a year ago. Yeah,
Right.
it was. I was on a Zoom call
Yeah.
with someone from Perth, Australia, in Perth University, Western Australia, actually, Vicky Bass,
Yeah.
and she introduced this idea, and I just thought, wow, I really like the way that captures things because I've seen all of this, and
Okay.
I've seen all of these behaviours that come through on the dark triad, and we are approaching Halloween as well, so it's probably a good subject with Halloween not too far away. But
Very topical. Yeah.
yeah,
Interesting.
the dark triad's like the flip side, in a
The
way, of the
flip
three
side,
E's.
I like that.
And it's about really three traits which, let's be clear, I'm not saying that there's people out there in business who massively over-index on all of these areas, because if they did, they'd probably be in jail. Then again, Jordan Belfort did go to jail, so Robert Maxwell may have ended up in jail if he hadn't conveniently ended up off his boat. But
That's
you think of the
interesting.
dark triad, you think of
Yeah.
psychopathy, you think of narcissism, and you think of Machiavellianism.
Something like
And
that,
these are
Steve.
all absolutely like that, with the old, nuclear warning sign. Because,
Yeah. I like that.
and as you go through life, you'll see people who show some of these traits. As I say,
Okay.
you're not going to get that many people who just massively over-index in all these areas.
Yeah.
You do get some, obviously, but as you go through your career, you'll see, the ones who are quite cold, quite emotionally cold, who don't really relate that well to other people, don't really have much empathy. And then you'll see the sort of, the narcissistic types who, they're very focused on the self. They have an innate sort of sense of superiority, maybe a feeling of entitlement. And then you get, the sort of the more devious ones, a bit more skilled in subterfuge and manipulation, which is the Machiavellian trend. So this whole dark triad is a little bit, like you flip the coin, and on one side you've got E's for leadership, which is golden and glowing, and then the other side it's dark and sinister, and you've got these three traits that people show. And look, we've all got them in us.
Dark
it's a
and
question
sinister.
of how much they come out, isn't it?
Okay. And do they come out a lot more in leadership, do you think, Steve? Do they suddenly, do they flourish in leadership, for example?
I think they can, dependent on the environment. And as I say, people show some of these traits.
Yeah.
We all have elements of it, but it varies in people how they come out. And a lot of that will be dependent on the environment they're in, the culture of that environment, the leaders above them and the types of behaviours they champion and encourage. And so much, again, comes down to self-awareness, doesn't it? Some people will never see their own narcissistic traits, but they're there, and others can.
Others can.
Some people,
yeah.
Others can, yeah. And some
Others
people
can.
will never acknowledge or appreciate that they act in a Machiavellian way. But, we've probably all come across people in business and in life generally who can be that little bit more manipulative, if you like, slightly less trustworthy. We're all people at the end of the day. No one's perfect.
Absolutely. We've all got flaws, right?
Of course we have. It's a question of, how much of the three E's you show versus how much of the dark triad you show.
Yeah.
And,
well, it's interesting. You've got quite a lot of response in the group today. So let me just, there's some questions coming up as well, but let me just dial back a little bit too. Kathy Heath says here, fellow Mancunian, by the way, we had a 3E model at Barclays, and one of them was edge, and I always felt this was misconstrued as arrogance, maybe part of the dark side coming up. So I think we're probably coming to answer that.
I think that's a brilliant point. I think that's a brilliant point, Kathy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The thing is, for me, E is for leadership, and I've used those three E's. Apparently, P&G have moved on to 5 E's now.
You just can't win, can you?
Execute and something else.
Okay,
but,
so there's the delivery angle.
You could come up with 11 if you wanted to. You could come
33.
Up with more. Absolutely. There's so many words beginning with E that are appropriate to leadership.
Course.
Educate, for example.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really good point about the edge. The edge can go too far.
The edge can go too far. Very good. Nicely said, Kathy. Elaine says this all links to Emotional Intelligence and Emotional Quotient, work of Daniel Goleman. Excellent book, by the way, for those people looking for a book on emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman's book is phenomenal. And knowing where to sit personally and how we're perceived is key. High D profiles can be perceived as bullies. The higher emotional intelligence, the better leaders we can be, I think, or can become, I think, says Elaine. Absolutely. I think that's the point that you're making, right? Become aware of ourselves. Yeah. Okay. And those high Ds can, those high in dominance, just they need to be aware too. Elaine says, dark triad, never heard of that phrase before. Loving the slide, Steve. So there we go. Now, Kathy comes up with a question here saying, how much does empathy count in successful leadership? What say you, Steve?
Well, personally, there's another word beginning with E, isn't there? I think it's really important, particularly in the energizing bit.
Yeah.
If you have empathy, then you can relate to other people, and you can relate to the challenges and difficulties that they might have. If you lack empathy, then you're going to ignore that, and you're going to put people under, at times, unfair and undue pressure. And we'll see an example of that in a moment that came out over the summer just gone. So, I think empathy is really important.
Empathy is really important. Okay. Andy Davis, morning, Andy. He says, these traits get people into leadership jobs, but don't often make them good leaders. I think there's a point that Andy's honing in on there, that these guys, these sort of traits, they do find themselves in leadership, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And when I'm commenting on leadership, I quite often put the word in sort of speech marks, because a lot of people, they're not really leaders.
No,
they're in leadership roles, but they're not leaders.
No, they've
just show more of this slide than the previous slide. Then, to me, they're not leaders.
Yeah, indeed. And Kathy says, behaviour breeds behaviour. Yeah, because it's endemic, indeed, right? Yeah. And if the top person has got difficult traits, then unfortunately the culture takes it on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if we talk about some sort of individuals now, that people might be able to relate to, then we can see where it all fits in.
Yeah, well, and that's where we're going. Yeah, just before we do that, Tanya says, "Morning, Tanya. Great to see you on Leaders Live. So interesting. We all have these shadows. Yeah, as Steve says, they're part of us as well. It's just how well controlled they are, I suppose, or not, as the case may be."
Well, absolutely. I can't remember which profile it is, because, as I say, I've done that many. But one of them does go into, where do you go under pressure?
Where do you go under pressure? Right.
And when you're under pressure, sometimes certain traits are then amplified under pressure, and that does sometimes push people down a little bit more down into these dark triad positions when they're under pressure. So that's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, and. There's an older word that used to be used certainly I remember this sort of in my first management positions, that sometimes leaders derail, Steve. Is this some of the qualities that leads to derailing if they're out of control?
Oh, I would say so, yeah. I mean, you look at that slide that's there, and really, would you want to work for someone who over-indexes in those areas? Now, you might want to work, if you're part of an inner clique.
Right.
I call it the corporate Illuminati, where quite often within the business you get a very small closed group who kind of keep everything to themselves and want to control everything. And this isn't necessarily the main board or the people at the very top. It could be within a department. You might get a director who's got cronies, if you like, and they kind of keep all the decisions to themselves.
Oh yeah, we've seen that in politics recently, right? In the last few years.
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
Without getting political.
If you're in that circle, it might seem a good place to be, but if you're not in that circle, it's an awful place to be. You don't feel valued.
Yeah. Now, Adam Vows, welcome, Adam. Lovely to see you. I'm a very supportive leader, and I want to provide the best environment and the culture for my staff. How can we support staff with low confidence?
Well, Adam's someone I know quite well, actually. So good morning, Adam. Thanks for tuning in. I think I'm with Adam on Friday, actually, so we can probably get into this. But I think one of the things is training. Empathy and training. But one of the key things is identifying, people's strengths, weaknesses, opportunity areas. And
Yeah.
then, giving them opportunities to build on the strengths, and also, the training and support and the coaching to address the weaknesses. You can't do it overnight, but it does take a little bit of time. But it's about having that focus and that commitment to people. And some people don't, some people, all they want, it comes back to the comment earlier about the deep profile. Some people just want the results and they don't care, how you get the results and what the human cost is.
There's a wake of dead bodies behind them, right? But they got the result. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. They just see, you almost see that the team has been collateral,
Yeah. Haven't we just seen that in politics, right, over the last few years? Absolutely.
Well, we've seen it in a major company, which I'll talk about in a few moments.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're going to come on to that in a minute. But Elaine just says, Adam, show them how to optimize their behavior traits. And I think you've just been hinting about something similar to that. So I hope that works for you, Adam. We'll come on more onto that in a moment. Elaine says, I'm learning a new language from Steve. Over-indexing. There you go, Steve. So a new language.
Sorry,
so have I, by the way.
A bit of FMCGism coming out there.
A bit of Oh, right. Okay,
fast-moving consumer goods. It's all my background.
Okay, so these are catchphrases, right? Okay, so Denise says this. So leaders need one set of skills to get them into leadership, and a difference. Oh, I like this. Denise comes out with some pearlers, and a different set to keep them there. ? As version of people go, where they feel welcome and stay, where they feel valued. ? What do you think to that, Steve?
I think absolutely spot on.
Yeah,
in
so do I.
My very simple northern dialect, I just class it as people appreciate being appreciated. They don't appreciate being taken for granted.
Yeah.
And I think you get that quite often in business. Senior people will take people for granted. The effort, the commitment, the dedication, the passion that an employee might put into the job that they do. A lot of leaders just take it for granted, and you don't feel valued in that situation at all.
No, indeed. Indeed. It's complex, isn't it? And there's something in what Denise is saying, isn't there? She comes out with some pearlers, does our Denise. Tanya says this. I'm just going to move this comment so that maybe there is an innate match, butchers and surgeons. Lovely, I love that. Perhaps that some people play these roles more naturally. Probably why I'm not into big corporate, lol. Well, and some people have an aversion to big corporate because of these dark triad things, right?
I absolutely love that, Tanya.
Yeah. Oh, I think
I've written that down. You may see that pop up on LinkedIn in the future, but I will give you credit.
Brilliant. Tanya comes out with some whopping phrases, so that's one of Tanya's specials. Morning to you, Tanya. Great to see you online. So talk us a little bit through, bring this to life with some examples from your research. You talked about traffic lights, you talked about the enable, the energize, and what was the other one? The other
Envision.
Yeah, envision. So talk us through some examples of real life people, Steve. So bring this to life for us.
Right, okay. Well, my favourite, the first one I always talk about is Uncle Joe.
Uncle Joe. Do you want this as a backdrop here? Will that work for you?
Yeah, that'll probably help. You can see Uncle Joe on the left there.
Joe Stalin.
It's Stalin, absolutely. And he was called Uncle Joe because Roosevelt dubbed him Uncle Joe to make him that little bit more palatable to the American public during the war, because I think everybody knew that he was a pretty odious and horrible man. And Stalin wasn't a great leader. He might have been the leader of however 100 million Russian people, but he wasn't a great leader. He wasn't confident. He was paranoid and fearful. He got into his position through Machiavellian tactics, subterfuge, and so he was completely paranoid. And so he didn't envision. Visioning for him was basically, just making sure that he stayed in his own position. He didn't have any great visions for the future. He enabled in the sense that he made some resource available, but he never made too much resource available, because then someone could do a really good job and that would make him feel threatened.
Right.
And, he didn't energize people, because in Stalin's world, failure was not an option, but being too successful was not an option either, because if you're too successful, then you became a threat again. So, at the end of the Second World War, the hero of the Soviet Union was Marshal Zhukov, who was seen as the person who defeated the Germans. And I think during the war, Stalin publicly commended him on 40 odd occasions. But then come the end of the war, what did Stalin do? Did he promote Zhukov? Did he make him a hero? No, he banished him into obscurity.
Really?
He just got rid of him and moved him to one side because obviously he could be a threat because he was popular and successful. So there's Stalin. So, he's on the left there, and he's in the red on the traffic lights.
On the traffic lights.
If you move over to the right, some people might recognise a former football manager there, which I call the Diamond. And some of the vintage might remember a certain pop song in the 1980s. The Diamond isn't far off it. The Diamond has vision. As a footballer, he was incredibly gifted. He had great talent. And because of that, he was always seen as a leader and a leader on the pitch. So he had vision, and he would enable the people that he coached. So once he moved from playing into coaching, this is where the problem comes in, because if you read, and there's various things you can Google online from different footballers, that as a coach he was never anywhere near as successful as he was as a player. And the reason for that was because basically he didn't energize, because what Glenn was the best and had to be the best. So at training sessions, when he was trying to coach the players, things that he could do just with complete ease might be a challenge for other people. They just weren't as gifted. Yeah. And over time, he would just sort of basically demoralise and undermine the players he was coaching. So he wasn't far off it. He had vision, he enabled, but ultimately he didn't energise because he always had to be the best and always had to be seen to be the best, and that just demotivated people.
Yeah.
So the Diamond isn't far off it, but for me, it's still in the dark. Too much of the dark triad, the sort of narcissism.
Right.
The funny little fellow there is actually the miller out of the story of Rumpelstiltskin. Now, in the story of Rumpelstiltskin, the little ogre or whatever he is, Rumpelstiltskin is seen as the villain of the piece, but I don't think he is actually. I think this chap is, because this chap was the one who boasted to the king that his daughter could spin straw into gold, and wanted to, increase his own standing and influence with the king. He had visions of grandiosity and being far more important than he actually was, and he got called out, and then he expected the impossible. And Rumpelstiltskin comes along, delivers the impossible, but charges a high price for it, which I don't think is completely unreasonable. So I feel a bit of sympathy for old Rumpelstiltskin. But there's actually a real life example of this that came up, I think, over the summer, which if anyone read the news over the summer, you'd be aware that Brewdog had a lot of problems over the summer, where something like 300 employees and former employees signed an open letter criticising the culture, criticising the drive for results at whatever cost, vanity projects. You can go online and read it all up, but Brewdog did not come out of that in a very good light at all. And there was a lot of people with mental health issues, lack of empathy, culture of personality, a very close inner circle that if you were part of, great, but everyone else was kind of ignored and forgotten. So sorry for anyone working at Brewdog or the leaders at Brewdog, but it's all in the public domain.
Absolutely.
And to me, that is a great example of dark triad leadership.
And,
so where does the talk...
Sorry, Apple are struggling the same thing, aren't they? I think I've heard various things in the newspapers about Apple's sort of approach to leadership. I don't know how true those are.
Yeah, I'm not as close to the Apple one. But I mean, clearly on the Brewdog one, they had great vision, and initially they had energy and they enabled and they were disruptor and they came up with, fabulous new ways to market the brand. It was a fabulous success story, but it just went too far. And I think they strayed into the dark. There was accusations that charity donations that they were, they'd said they'd made hadn't actually been made. They were flying around everywhere in a private jet, but then talking about the environment all the time. And, it just, I think Brewdog probably, was a good example of the 3 E's to begin with, but then just straight too far
to the dark side.
Yeah. Absolutely, into the dark side. Which then brings us to, let's, it might be Halloween approaching, but let's bring a bit of light onto it.
Indeed. Shine a light, Steve.
Shine a light. What does the torch do? Well, I've picked out a couple of leaders there. One, the one on the left, you can maybe just about see it. Look, it's a soldier. It's from Band of Brothers.
Oh, Band of Brothers, right.
Band of Brothers, very famous True TV series. And there's a character there called Sergeant Lipton, who, is quite a quiet, unassuming chap, but he is the backbone of the the group. He supports everyone, he helps them, he energizes, does what he can to enable them, but he doesn't really have much vision, and he doesn't see himself as a leader. So you could say he's probably got a third degree of imposter syndrome.
Keeps him on the straight and narrow.
Absolutely. One of my favourite scenes is towards the end, where they get a new lieutenant comes in to run the company, and Lipton says to him, the men are just delighted to have a leader again. And the lieutenant says, well, from what I've heard, they always have had a leader. They've always had someone who supported them, who guided them, who helped them. And Lipton looks at him, and the lieutenant says, you don't know who I'm talking about, do you? And he says, no, sir.
No,
he said,
sir.
It's you, Sergeant Lipton. It's you. You've always been the leader of this group. And I just think that's brilliant, that this unassuming guy, absolute backbone, who everyone could depend on, did everything for everyone else, but just was very much the unsung hero and just didn't see himself in that leadership role.
Nice.
And I love that example. And then coming, fully into the light. Example here is a real person that I've worked with. It's a lady called Helen Jane Nelson she's the CEO now of a company called Sakara Consulting. And
shout out for her.
Absolutely. I first worked with Helen 20 odd years ago when I was at Kellogg's, and she was brilliant. One of the best leaders I've ever come across, real vision, really painted a picture of where you could get to and what the future could look like. It was a great coach to help enable you, to provide the resource and the knowledge to help you get there. Right. And then a wonderfully motivating and inspiring person who I personally really, really responded to. So I always hold up Helen Jane as just, being a great example of a leader. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Brilliant.
So if you think about what I call the torch shining down there, great acronyms. I am from an FMCG background, as I say, and torch for me is my experience of what great leaders have. They shine a light through a torch on people, and
shine through the darkness.
Absolutely, yeah. They provide illumination, and the torch for me stands for, first of all, the T is for trust.
Yeah.
So the best leaders trust themselves, but they put trust in other people.
Yeah.
And if you have trust, then, Lencioni's work, which I know you're familiar with, Andrew.
Oh, yes.
That trust leads to transparency,
Yeah.
and transparency leads to effective teamwork.
Yeah.
So the best leaders for me have trust in themselves and in other people.
Okay.
Then you get onto the O, which is organisation. The best leaders are organised. They have a plan. They know where they're trying to get to. They know what they're doing. So they're organised. They're not just jumping and reacting to things left, right, and centre. They're proactive. They have a plan. And they know where they're trying to get to.
Okay.
Then you get the R, which is responsibility. And the best leaders obviously take responsibility. They're not shy of responsibility. They don't hide. But what they also do is recognise when responsibility can be shared and when responsibility can be given to others to help them grow and develop. They never throw someone in the bus. They don't give them the proverbial hospital pass. But when they sense that someone is ready for responsibility, they give it to them and they share it with them.
Lovely. Yeah.
Then you come on to the C, which is courage. The best leaders have courage.
Absolutely.
And through their courage, that breeds confidence in other people. And then finally, the humility that I mentioned at the start.
Touched on earlier. Yeah.
Absolutely. The best leaders have humility. Yeah. Lovely. They're not aloof. They're not arrogant. They're not in the dark. They're not in those psychopathic and narcissistic and Machiavellian areas. They shine a light. And so for me, if you're going to be a leader, think of those qualities and make sure that, you've always got fresh batteries in your torch.
Which comes from resources, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And if you're working with a great leader, bask in the light that they shine and learn from
Love that. Yeah. So trust, organisation, responsibility, courage and humility, right?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
To me, that
in a
is
nutshell.
The best leaders.
In a nutshell. Fantastic. Okay, guys, look, we're closing off very shortly, but look, please keep your comments coming. Let's get a couple of questions in for Steve before he goes, so that you've got an opportunity to ask those questions. So please keep them coming. I know there's going to be a bit of a delay before we get them through here. So just finally, Steve, what fantastic stuff, says Denise. There we go. Ta-da! Lovely. Thanks Denise. Summarise for us, Steve, 3 tips for us to take away.
3 tips to take away.
Put you on the spot now.
I've often thought that when you meet people, leaders, colleagues,
Yeah.
people you work with, there's people that you like,
Yep.
and there's people that you respect.
Yeah.
And some people you both like and respect, and they're the ones that you really gravitate to. They're the green on the traffic lights, if you like.
Okay.
And if you get to that position where you are liked and respected, it's a wonderful position to be in, for you as an individual, because it says you're getting leadership and you're doing it right. It's a wonderful position to be in. But, you've got to make sure that you carry that responsibility in the right way and don't drift into the dark tendencies.
Yeah. So
if you get to that position where you're liked and respect, and then you let your standards slip, people can feel a bit duped, and they can even feel a bit betrayed. So, if you're a great leader and you work on your leadership and you're liked and respected, it's a big responsibility, but it's an important responsibility to carry. So I'd say that was probably the first.
Yep.
Second, I would say, and this relates to the diamond a little bit, the Glenn Hoddle analogy, that leaders should set the right example.
Yeah.
And they should keep raising the bar. However, and this is the Glenn Hoddle bit, continually outdoing the others or outdoing the people in your team or always showing that you're the very best, I don't think actually helps improve the team.
No.
That doesn't demonstrate humility.
No, bring the best out in others, right?
Absolutely. So that would be my second one. And then the third one, I mentioned it earlier, it's just very simple, plain English, but I just think, people appreciate being appreciated.
Yeah, appreciate others.
They don't appreciate being taken for granted.
Yeah.
And it's surprising how often you see that.
So that is, be liked and respected, but check yourself often. Raise the bar and appreciate others, Steve. Is that your three tips?
Yeah, that's
fantastic.
So, yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steve. So listen, keep the questions coming. And Robin Kurz and need to sustain it. I think that might be a follow-up on what you've just said there, and a need to sustain it, says Robin.
Absolutely, yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, I like that. So look, thanks, Steve. Just a bit on we've got a freebie from Steve, a very generous freebie. Stevie's freebie giveaway is 5 free signed copies of his latest book, Leadership, Levity and the Power of Bait, Alaska. I have that book myself, so thank you very much, Steve. And for the first 5 people, we'll get this to respond in the comments on the LinkedIn live event at the end of this live stream show. And that means you can go now if you want. So please pop them into the comments if you want a book now. Kathy says, great stuff, great session. So fantastic. Thank you, Kathy. So look, I hope you found this topic useful and has given you further food for thought, everybody. Thanks again, Steve. Look, from my side, I'm founder of a CEO community called Inspired CEOs. And if you are a CEO of a business, a CEO or a business owner with staff, then we'd love to invite you to a free 2 or 3 weeks of joining our community and experience our game-changing conversations and problem-solving hot seats. Simply contact me for further discussion. And Tanya says, woohoo, I want one. So she's your first customer. So thanks, Tanya. Well done. And also please contact me if you want to develop high performance teamwork in your business, and you can find more details on my website. Links will all follow later on in the description today. So quick word on Leaders Live. Let me just bring up the right scene here. Right, okay. So look, I set up Leaders Live with a purpose to edutain and explore high performance topics via informal fun and sort of back and forth, interesting conversations with interesting people like Steve, with a mindset and a passion to help business leaders and businesses succeed in these rapidly changing times that we're living through, folks. And I do this because I believe this generation of business leaders will get success through the people factor. I think that's really important. And that whole notion for me is I to the power of we. So that's a little bit about Leaders Live. I'll come back to comments in a minute. Next Leaders Live will be Tuesday the 26th of October at the same time, 8:45, and we will be talking all things business branding. That was supposed to be this week, but it got shipped to last week through circumstances beyond anyone's control. And it's going to be led by branding guru Anthony Jones from We Are Go. So we're looking forward to that. I think that topic will be really interesting and useful too. Looking forward to that and hope that you'll be there. So be there or be square, folks. Let's just pick up the comments. So Robin Kohler says, yes, please. That's very interesting. So she wants a book. Amazing events. Would love a copy of Steve's book. That's Matt Knowles. So you'll pick that up in the comments. Elaine, thanks, Elaine. Great to chat to you guys. Thank you very much. And yes, please, Steve. I want a copy of the book, she says. So fantastic. And Paul Winfield, hi Paul, great to see you. Brilliant stuff, guys, he says. So there you go. I think we've probably run out of 5 books, I think, there, by the looks of it. So well done, everybody.
If you can get the if we can get the names and addresses, and I'll
I mean, I would probably just take off the comments from here and link in with them privately and DM them, and you'll get them from there. It's probably the way to do that, Steve. Okay. All right. Super. Great. Listen, we're out of time, folks. But be there and be square for the next one on Leaders Live. Steve, we've really enjoyed talking to you today. Great crowd today. Thank you. Round of applause to everybody who joined us. Thank you very much, folks. It cost me a fortune, that crowd, to hire that crowd just to do that bit. So, guys, thank you very much. See you again next week. And thanks to Steve. Brilliant session, Steve. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed working with you, and hope you have a great day in Manchester in the pouring rain. So cheers for now, everybody. See you next week. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.